We expect loyalty over opinions, she said, sliding the manila envelope across the table. And silence, she added, without looking up from her tablet. I'm 51. My title, until that Monday, was Senior Risk and Compliance Officer. 15. Years in the same chair at the same desk under the same flickering ceiling light. I wasn't flashy. I didn't charm clients or give TED Talks. I made sure the truth was traceable. And for a while, that was enough. I wasn't the loudest in meetings, but when something didn't smell right, I said it, quietly but clearly. Like last spring, when a $280K contract was pushed through with no audit trail and a signature that didn't match the standard template. I flagged it, sent the email, copied the right people. 3 weeks later, my office was moved closer to the elevator. Coincidence? I stopped believing in those a long time ago. What people saw was someone who wore the same kind of shoes for a decade and brought the same thermos to every morning meeting. What they didn't see? The hours spent after midnight digging through layers of expense reports with numbers that didn't talk to each other. They didn't see the offshore entities showing up in vendor chains. They didn't hear the whispered conversations I recorded through my pen. Yeah, that kind of pen. My daughter used to joke that I was the boring superhero, saving companies from themselves, one spreadsheet at a time. I missed birthdays, I missed anniversaries, but I never missed a red flag, not once. And the moment I became inconvenient to their agenda, I wasn't just pushed aside, I was erased. Meetings disappeared from my calendar. My badge access got glitchy. You're just being paranoid, one of the new VPs told me with a nervous laugh. But paranoia implies uncertainty. I had evidence. They thought I'd leave with a cardboard box and a signed NDA. But I had something else tucked in that box. A drive. 2, actually. One in my coat pocket and another already mailed to a contact I trusted in DC. Because when the new COO said, "It's better if you don't dig into that vendor list," I knew I was already standing on a landmine. And I wasn't, planning to walk away quietly. When I joined, we didn't even have a real office. Just a drafty room above a print shop and a team that ran on caffeine and belief. I built the first compliance process on a whiteboard with a dry marker that barely worked. We didn't have protocols. We had instincts. And mine always pointed to protecting what we were building. The founder believed in structure with soul. He'd say build it right or don't build it at all. I stayed late, rewrote policies by hand, and turned chaos into consistency. Over the years, we grew, new clients, bigger floors, outside funding. I was promoted not for politics, but precision. Then the suits arrived. Titles got longer. The culture got quieter. The people who remembered where we started began disappearing. And I could feel it. Integrity wasn't scalable anymore. But I remembered everything. Every step. Every system. And while they were celebrating growth, I was watching it rot from the inside. It didn't happen all at once. That's what made it dangerous. The decline came in whispers, not sirens. First, I stopped getting invited to meetings I used to. Just a smaller group this time, they said. Then a junior analyst I'd trained, nice kid, still called me sir, was introduced as the new liaison for compliance. My role? Oversight support. That was the first time I heard, my job title reduced to an echo. They moved my desk. Again. This time closer to the break room. To foster collaboration. What it really meant was, keep him out of sight. The new hires came in waves. Bright-eyed, slick resumes. They talked fast, wore wireless earbuds in the office, and couldn't tell the difference between an audit trail and a shared drive. One of them once asked if a whistleblower form needed to be serious. I wish I was kidding. I tried to stay useful. Suggested a review of our vendor approval system after 3 names showed up twice in 2 months with slightly altered details. No response. Not even a thanks, we'll look into it. My credentials were limited weeks later. Routine update. IT claimed. But I knew exactly what it meant. I was being boxed out. People stopped making eye contact. Conversations changed. When I walked past, I'd become a ghost in a place I helped build. They didn't confront me. They diluted me. Subtly, quietly. Like replacing bricks one by one in a foundation and hoping the house won't notice. But I noticed. I saw the new consultants walking in with their clickbait solutions. I watched the expense accounts balloon while documentation vanished. I heard the fake gratitude in their voices when they'd say, "We really appreciate your years of service." And I knew what was next. The first email came 3 weeks after they let me go. "Just wondering if you could hop on a quick call." It said, no subject line, no greeting. I didn't respond. Then came the second. "We're having issues locating the original compliance documentation for our vendor protocol. Would really appreciate your insight." Insight? You buried my work? Now you want to resurrect it? I watched in silence as things began to fall apart. Little things at first, a report flagged by regulators, a client inquiry that turned into an audit. The new team scrambled. The consultants disappeared. I said nothing. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that I had kept everything. Not out of spite, out of principle. Flash drives, physical files, version histories, timestamps. I had copies, off-site, backed up, verified. I wasn't angry, I was focused. And when the third message came, this time from legal, subtly hinting that non-cooperation could escalate matters, I poured myself a quiet drink, opened my laptop and smiled. Let them escalate. They had no idea what was coming. It was a Tuesday when the call came. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice, then answered out of instinct. "We've been following your work for years," the voice said. Calm, measured. It wasn't a recruiter, it was the VP of governance at a competing firm, one I'd flagged years ago for shady procurement practices. "Heard what happened?" He continued. "Let's talk." I didn't say yes right away. Not because I didn't need the job, but because I'd spent 15 years guarding the walls of a company that left me outside the gates the moment I became inconvenient. Loyalty doesn't just shift like that. Or at least mine doesn't. But then he said something that landed different. "We don't want you for what they buried. We want you because you knew it mattered." That night, I opened my old files. Not out of revenge, but readiness. What I found wasn't just errors. It was architecture built on fraud, shell vendors, recycled invoices, training reimbursements that funneled tens of thousands into personal accounts. And worse, whistleblower reports that had never been escalated. Just vanished. I sent a single email, not to them, to the National Compliance Board contact I knew personally, not because I wanted the headlines, but because some things shouldn't stay buried. 2 days later, I accepted the offer from the new firm, smaller, sharper, people who still looked each other in the eye. Onboarding was immediate. They didn't care about press releases, they cared about process. The first meeting I attended, someone actually asked, "Does this pass an ethics test?" I nearly forgot what that sounded like. Meanwhile, the collapse back at my old company was starting to take shape. One client pulled out after an internal audit revealed inconsistencies. Then another. Their CFO resigned, quietly. Then HR restructured. Legal started sniffing around, asking the new team for files they never had access to. And still I stayed silent, until a lawyer from my former employer called me directly. "We're hoping to clarify a few things. There seems to be some confusion around the original compliance framework." Confusion? I built the damn thing, they shredded it and expected no one would notice the smoke. "I'm not available," I said, and hung up. That night, I received a message from one of the junior analysts they kept after letting me go. No greeting. Just, "They don't know what to do without you. It's falling apart." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the data packet, fully indexed, time-stamped, annotated, to the federal agency contact, who once thanked me, off the record, for being the kind of guy who still believes in documentation. He remembered me. They all would. My new office was smaller, no skyline view, no branded fruit water in the break room. But the air was different. People moved with purpose. When someone raised a red flag, others listened. I didn't lead with my past. I let my work speak. And it did. Weeks later, the news broke. Internal investigation at former industry leader following allegations of financial misconduct. My phone buzzed. Old colleagues, some apologizing, others asking what they should do now. I responded to none of them. Because the thing about revenge, real revenge, is that it doesn't come with explosions or press conferences. It comes in silence. It comes in the look they give each other when they realize the one person who could have saved them already found a better place to be. The headlines didn't say my name, but I didn't need them to. Key contracts suspended after internal failures. Anonymous source triggers federal audit. Whistleblower documentation reveals financial irregularities spanning 4 years. Inside the building I once helped shape, panic became protocol. People started resigning midweek. Others were escorted out quietly. The same executives who replaced me with slides and buzzwords now scrambled to explain how their systems failed. Spoiler, they were never their systems. A senior partner from legal called again, this time more formally. We'd like to extend an invitation to discuss the architecture of your former department. Translation: please come fix what we broke. I didn't return the call. Instead, I watched from a distance as the collapse gained speed. Regulatory bodies launched investigations. Investors pulled out. 2 of the company's largest clients went public about compliance concerns. A third filed suit. Turns out the paper trail I left behind was much cleaner than the one they tried to create. They sent a letter. Official, desperate, and almost funny. We're concerned about possible breaches of confidentiality. But I never broke anything. I documented, I protected. They did the rest. A few days later, I received another envelope, this one thicker. Legal threats, implied consequences, and at the bottom, the name of a junior lawyer I'd once trained during her internship. I smiled. She used to ask me why. I printed backup copies of everything. Now she was threatening the very archive that kept me safe. I placed the letter in a drawer and poured myself a drink. Not to celebrate. Just to mark the moment. They thought I left quietly. What they didn't realize is that I took the truth with me. It started with a voicemail. Mr. Carter, this is Special Agent Leland with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We'd appreciate a moment of your time. I listened twice, not because I didn't understand, but because hearing it confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't internal anymore. It had crossed the threshold, and I hadn't pushed it. I'd simply opened the door. We met in a quiet federal building 2 cities over. Unmarked room, 2 agents, a printout of one of the documents I'd archived 3 years ago, highlighted, annotated, and now part of a formal case file. What made you keep all this? The second agent asked. Not accusatory, curious. I paused. Thought about the missed birthdays, the quiet warnings, the eyes that stopped meeting mine in the hallway. Because I knew no one else would. They nodded. Over the next 2 hours, I walked them through the files, vendor loops, ghost approvals, internal memos that contradicted audit reports. I explained how approvals were forged digitally, how 2 senior executives had full override access they weren't supposed to have. I showed the timestamps, the logs, the signatures that didn't match. I even had footage from a compliance training where the COO laughed and said, "We're flexible with policy, as long as the numbers look good." They asked for copies. I handed over the drive, one I hadn't even referenced yet. You might want this too. Their expressions changed, not just surprise, respect, that quiet kind of realization that someone had done the hard work no one else was willing to do. A week later, subpoenas were issued. Another week, and the press finally connected the dots. The same executives who had pushed for cost-cutting were exposed in an embezzlement scheme using offshore fronts to funnel consultant payments back into personal accounts. Millions. Hidden inside marketing development initiatives and fake DEI programs that never existed. The same people who said I was resistant to change were indicted for manipulating internal compliance software I had built. And then, unexpectedly, I was asked to testify. Not by a lawyer, by the agency. They didn't just want my data, they wanted me. I stood in front of that room under oath, with the people who once dismissed me watching from the gallery. Some didn't show up. Cowards rarely do. Others stared at the table, avoiding my eyes like they used to when they walked past my desk the week I was terminated. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just told the truth. And that was louder than anything else I could have done. After the hearing, one of the agents pulled me aside. Not many people would have held on to this, let alone cataloged it. I didn't do it to get here, I said. I did it because it was right. Still, he nodded, you may have saved a lot more than a balance sheet. Turns out, there were others. Employees too afraid to speak. Whistleblowers ignored. Clients misled. And once one case opened, others followed. A pattern, a conspiracy. Now undeniable, the DOJ filed charges within a month. Wire fraud, obstruction, securities violations, and something else that stuck with me. Willful suppression of internal compliance mechanisms. My name wasn't in the headlines, but my fingerprints were everywhere. They had tried to erase me. Instead, I became the evidence. I didn't celebrate the verdict. No champagne, no victory lap. Just a walk through the city, hands in pockets, coat zipped up against the wind, watching. People rushed past me like they had somewhere important to be. Maybe they did. I wasn't in a hurry anymore. That part of my life was over. The proving, the justifying, the late nights spent writing reports for people who wouldn't even read them. Now, I was building something new. The offer came quietly. A smaller firm. No headlines, no promises of stock options or corner offices. Just a simple email. We'd like you to help us do this right. That was all I needed to hear. I didn't ask about salary. Didn't care about the title. What mattered was that their systems were clean, their books transparent, and their board still believed that integrity was a function, not a liability. On my first day, the CEO walked me through the floor, not to show off, but to introduce me to people, real people. He said my name like it mattered. He's not here to watch you, he told the team. He's here to protect what we're building. That moment? It was worth more than any bonus I ever received in the last company. We didn't rush anything. No massive overhauls, no fire drills, just clarity. Slowly, I began to build the framework from the ground up. Not copied. Not repurposed. Reimagined. I brought in old colleagues I trusted, quiet operators like me, people who valued precision over noise. We created systems that didn't just catch bad behavior, but encouraged the right one. We trained people, not through mandatory webinars, but real conversations. We wrote policies that employees actually understood and followed. Because they saw the point. I'd sit with departments after hours, reviewing real cases, using real language. Here's how someone might try to get around this, I'd say. Here's how you spot it. And their eyes would widen, not with fear, but understanding. For the first time, compliance wasn't a threat. It was a shield. And slowly, word spread. Other companies started noticing. Clients who had walked away from my old firm called us curious. What's your framework look like? They asked. How'd you onboard risk into your operational flow without disrupting delivery? I answered, but only after asking them something first. Are you trying to check a box? Or are you actually ready to change? Most weren't, but a few were. And those became partners, not clients. Partners. I wasn't chasing growth this time. I was curating it. And that's when I realized this wasn't revenge. Not anymore. This was restoration. The respect I'd once fought so hard to earn was returning on its own. Quietly. Naturally. Because this time, I wasn't asking for it. I was simply living it. One night, after a long strategy session, one of the junior analysts pulled me aside. You know, she said, people listen differently when you speak, like, it matters. I smiled. Then it's working. The email came from a name I hadn't seen in a while. Subject, confidential proposal, integration opportunity. I almost deleted it. Almost. But curiosity won. Inside was a single paragraph and a link to a private meeting room. The sender? A senior executive from one of the investment groups that had once propped up my former employer before the collapse. The same people who once ignored my risk reports then begged for clarity when it all fell apart. We're looking for someone to lead the compliance and governance strategy for a multi-firm integration, the message said. Your name was brought up more than once. I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't about the position. I'd been offered titles before. It was about what this represented. Influence. Real influence. The kind that shapes entire systems. The kind that decides whether companies are built to last or built to deceive. When we met, their pitch was polished, numbers tight, and their urgency obvious. This isn't just about fixing things, one of them said. It's about preventing another collapse. I listened. I nodded. And then I asked the only question that mattered. Do I get to define the terms? They hesitated. What do you mean? I mean non-negotiables. No compromise on whistleblower protections. Full transparency in reporting structures. No back doors in system access. I want autonomy, not advisory input. If I do this, I build the structure, not inherit the damage. They looked at each other, then back at me. You'd have full control. It wasn't a power play. I wasn't interested in control for control's sake. I just knew what happened when the wrong people held the steering wheel, and the right. People were left watching from the back seat, so I agreed. But slowly, cautiously, not with excitement, but with clarity. And this time, I came in with a blueprint already written. Not just for systems, but for people. A structure where trust wasn't assumed, it was earned. Where compliance wasn't a department, it was a culture. I didn't return to punish anyone. That chapter was closed. But I did come back with one. Mission, to build something no one could quietly destroy from the inside. I walked into the building through the same revolving door, same marble lobby, same cold lighting. Even the same security guard nodded as if no time had passed. But everything had changed. This time, I wasn't there for a meeting. I was there to lead. The irony? The office they gave me was 3 doors down from the one I'd been removed from years ago. I passed it in silence. Still remembered the exact sound of the cardboard box I'd carried out that day. Still remembered how no one looked up. Now, they all stood when I entered the room. I didn't say much in those early days. Didn't need to. My presence alone unsettled the right people and reassured the ones who had stayed quiet for too long. There was no revenge speech, no subtle digs, just execution, clean processes, transparent reporting, risk protocols reinstalled, exactly as they should have been from the start. One morning, a junior employee stopped me by the elevator. They say you used to work here before, she said. I smiled. Something like that. I didn't need them to know the full story. The walls remembered I rebuilt in silence. Every correction, every restored policy was a quiet middle finger to the past. But not out of bitterness, out of principle. I wasn't here to get even. I was here to prove that integrity, when planted right, grows back stronger. And when I finally sat down at that desk, my new desk, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt ready. Because some returns don't need applause, they just need purpose. I don't care about statues, I care about structure. So I started a program, quiet, internal, but deliberate. A mentorship track for young professionals who still believe doing the right thing is part of the job. We meet twice a month, no slides, no jargon, just stories, mistakes, lessons that aren't found in compliance manuals. I tell them, your power isn't in what you say, it's in what you document, in what you protect when no one's watching. Some stay, some move on, but they carry it with them. The idea that ethics isn't a brand, it's a foundation. I no longer need recognition. I'm not interested in credit. I'm interested in what lasts when shortcuts collapse, and who stands when the smoke clears. I never raised my voice. I never forced respect, I just waited because the truth, real value doesn't scream to be seen, it stands still, and eventually everything else collapses around it.